The word coward is heavy. It lands in a room like a dead weight, sucking all the air out. It's a word that's supposed to be screamed in the chaos of battle, a desperate accusation. But the first time Lieutenant Keller used it for me, it wasn't shouted, it was typed. It was a neat, clinical little box he checked on an after-action report, signing his name in clean, crisp ink. I didn't know it at the time, but that single piece of paper was a bullet, and it was aimed right at my honor, right at the core of who I was. I never imagined my own commander, the man supposed to lead us, would be the one to bury me. I never thought the deepest wound I'd receive in combat wouldn't come from the enemy, but from the polished brass on my own side. An enemy's bullet is predictable. It's just doing its job. A friendly one fired from behind you, wrapped in a lie. That's the one that poisons. That's the one that follows you home. I can still see the ink on that page in my mind. Black and sterile, colder than any sniper's scope. I was Specialist Evans. Just Evans. In that place, your first name didn't matter. It was a luxury. I was a designated marksman with Ghost Platoon, attached to the 10th Mountain. Our home was Fob Talon, a miserable patch of gravel and HESCO barriers carved into the side of a mountain that hated us. The wind there had a personality, a malicious, cutting one. It spent its days trying to tear our tents from the ground, and its nights whistling secrets of old wars. We lived in plywood hooches that smelled of damp wood, old sweat, and rifle oil. The generators had two modes, deafening roar or dead silence. The silence was always worse. It meant the heaters were off, and the cold of the high desert would creep into your bones, a damp, aching cold that no amount of wool could stop. You could smell the air. It was a mix of diesel exhaust, a strange metallic tang from the dust, and the constant simmering smell of burning trash and human waste from the pit. This was my life, and I was good at it. The rhythm of it was simple. Patrol, clean weapon, eat, sleep, repeat. I was good at my job. Not flashy, but good. A marksman's job isn't about running and gunning. It's about patience. It's about math. It's about controlling your own breathing until the world narrows down to the single focused image in your scope. My job was to see things others didn't, and to end threats before they even knew I was there. My platoon, they were professionals. Before Keller, we were a quiet, lethal machine. Our previous LT, Captain Price, he'd been promoted and moved on, had come up from the enlisted ranks. He trusted us. He knew that quiet didn't mean lazy. He knew that our hard-won routines were exactly that. Hard-won. They were procedures written in the blood of men who'd made mistakes. My spotter, Diaz, was the closest thing I had to a brother. We were a two-man team. We'd spend hours together, just watching, lying on our bellies on some godforsaken ridge. We communicated in hand signals, grunts, and the occasional shared cynical look. He'd pass me the wind readings, 8-mile-per-hour cross, half value, and I'd make the adjustment. There was a bond there, forged in silence and shared risk. We all had that. We had a guy, Doc Simmons, who could stitch you up in the dark. We had a machine gunner, Rhino, who carried his 240 like it was a toy. We were a family, or the closest thing you get in a place like that. It was the only thing that kept you sane. And then Lieutenant Keller arrived. He wasn't like our last LT. Keller was clean. He arrived with brand new, unblistered boots and an air of absolute certainty. He was fresh from West Point, and he clearly believed the manuals he'd memorized were a perfect substitute for the messy, unpredictable reality of war. He saw our quiet professionalism not as competence, but as laziness. He mistook our routines for sloppy procedure. On his first day, he held a formation to check the angle of our berets in a combat zone. He demanded we sound off in the mess hall. He was a man playing soldier, and he was in charge. I felt his eyes on me from the first week. I was quiet. I didn't join the loud card games. I didn't boast about weekend passes I'd never had. I just did my work. I'd be in the armory, stripping my M110 down to the pins, cleaning parts that were already clean. In his world, I was an anomaly. He'd walk by, his shadow falling over my workbench. Specialist, your muzzle velocity documentation. It's not aligned with the new SOP 30-5. Format it again. I'd just nod. Yes, sir. And I'd fix it. He didn't like that. He didn't like my calm. I think, deep down, he was terrified. He was a man drowning in his own inadequacy, and he saw my lack of fear not as professionalism, but as a vacuum, a blank space on his roster. He needed to fill that space with a label he understood, and he was desperate to prove he was in command. He found his chance during a routine patrol we called Operation Stone's Throw. It was supposed to be a simple reconnaissance, mapping a new trade route the locals were using. A walk in the sun, he'd called it. We were walking a high ridge. The valley spread out below us like a dusty map. The air was still, too still. I felt it first, that prickle on my neck. The air felt empty, like it was holding its breath. I stopped. Diaz stopped with me. I scanned the rocks on the opposing ridge, about 700 meters out. Diaz, I whispered. I've got something. 2 o'clock. Sun reflection, not glass. Looks like a lens. A spotter's scope. Keller, walking point like he was leading a parade. Heard the stop in the chatter. What is it, Evans? See a goat? A few of the guys chuckled nervously. Sir? I said, keeping my voice low, my eyes glued to the scope. I have a potential spotter, 2 o'clock, high ground. Recommend we find cover. Now. Potential? Keller scoffed, loud enough for the entire valley to hear. We don't stop for potential, specialist. We have a timeline. We stop now, we'll be late for chow, and 1SG will have my ass. He turned. Let's move, people. Quit. He never finished the word. The first round cracked. It wasn't an explosion. It was a snap. A supersonic whip crack that passed so close I felt the air pressure change. It struck a rock right where Keller's head had been a second before, sending stone fragments into his face. He screamed. Not a war cry. A high-pitched, surprised yelp. He dropped like a stone, crawling behind a small boulder, his rifle clattering uselessly on the rocks. He wasn't just down. He was gone. He had vanished from the chain of command. Sniper! Diaz yelled, his voice all business. 2 o'clock. He's got the LT pinned. The platoon did what it was trained to do. They scattered, finding cover, returning fire in the general direction. But it was panicked. Keller was frozen. He wasn't giving orders. He wasn't leading. He was just hiding, making himself small. Evans, can you see him? Diaz had his binos up. I can't get a muzzle flash. I'm looking, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady. This was my world. This was the math. I breathed out, slow. I saw the puff of dust after the shot. He was good. He was moving. Got him, I said. He's repositioning. 650 meters. Breathing. Hold. The world narrowed. There was just the crosshair, the wind, and the man on the other side. I squeezed the trigger. The recoil felt familiar, a solid punch. I watched through the scope. A small tumble of rock. No more movement, no more shots. Silence returned, heavier this time. Target neutralized, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Threat eliminated, sir. Keller crawled out. He was bleeding from a small cut on his cheek. He was breathing hard. He looked at me. His eyes weren't grateful. They were furious, humiliated. He dusted himself off, his hands shaking. Everyone, check in, report. The patrol back was tense. No one spoke. Back at the FOB, we were called into the command tent for the AAR. The captain was there, looking tired. Lieutenant, what happened? Keller stood tall. His voice was suddenly firm, rehearsed. He pointed at me. Sir. Specialist Evans froze. He completely abandoned his sector. He failed to engage the target, forcing me to take command and suppress the threat myself. I felt the blood drain from my face. Sir? What? That's not… Specialist. Keller's voice was sharp, cutting me off. Are you calling your commanding officer a liar? He turned back to the captain. He panics under pressure, sir. I saw it. He was shaking. He was screaming about snipers. Caused the whole platoon to lose discipline. I had to physically move to draw fire just to get them to react. It was cowardice. Plain and simple. He put us all at risk. I looked at Diaz, begging him with my eyes. Tell them. Diaz just looked at the ground. The other men, they looked away. I was standing there, my mouth open. The lie was so total, so complete. It was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. Sir, Captain, The captain looked at me, then at Keller. A polished lieutenant versus a quiet specialist. Brass versus grunt. Specialist Evans, the captain said, his voice flat. Your rifle will be inspected, and you'll be on restriction, pending an inquiry. You are off the line, effective immediately. Get out of my sight. I just stood there. I felt my chest tighten. I'd been shot, not by a sniper, but by a report. Keller had found his label for me. He hadn't just filled the vacuum, he had buried me in it. I was condemned, and as I walked out of that tent, The looks from my own platoon, the men I'd shared chow with, the men I'd trusted, they weren't angry. They were full of pity and contempt. That was so much worse. I was alone. The fall was fast and brutal. Cowardice under fire. Even the suggestion of it is a plague. It's an infection that spreads through a platoon faster than any virus. The inquiry was a joke. It was my word against a lieutenant's. My hesitation, as Keller called it, was now the official story. He twisted my professionalism, my patience, my scan of the sector, into a narrative of me freezing in terror. He claimed he was the one who spotted the sniper, and that my late shot was just me firing wildly after the danger had passed. It was a masterpiece of political fiction. I wasn't court-martialed. That would have required actual evidence, a trial. Keller didn't want that. He didn't want the truth to have a voice. Instead, I was given the modern military equivalent of being put in the stocks. I was reassigned to FOB support. My rifle was taken from me, locked in the armory. I was given a reflective vest and a shovel. My new job, burning the shitters. I'd spend 12 hours a day, hauling 50-gallon drums of human waste, dousing them in diesel, and setting them on fire. The smoke was thick, black, and acrid. It clung to me. I couldn't wash the smell off. It was the smell of shame. The humiliation was total. Men from other platoons would walk by, see the 10th mountain patch on my shoulder, and just stare. "That's him," they'd whisper. "The coward from Ghost." My own platoon. They avoided me. It was like I didn't exist. The mess hall was the worst. I'd get my tray, and the long tables would suddenly fill. I'd find the one empty spot. I'd sit. The man next to me, a guy I'd shared my last pack of cigarettes with. He'd stop eating. He'd sigh. He'd stand up and walk away. Then the next one. Within a minute, I'd be sitting alone at a 20-foot table. Silence. Just the scrape of my fork on the metal tray. I could feel their eyes on my back. The whispers. It was louder than any firefight I'd ever been in. Diaz. He was the worst. He wouldn't even look at me. He'd just stare at his tray, his jaw tight. I knew he knew the truth. I knew. He saw what really happened, but he was silent. His silence was its own kind of betrayal. He had a career to think about. He had a family. I was just Evans, the ghost. Keller made sure to twist the knife. He'd inspect the burn pit area. He'd walk by, his boots crunching on the gravel, a look of profound disappointment on his face. "Evans," he'd say, just loud enough for the gate guards to hear. "It's a dirty job, but I'm glad we found one you're suited for. Keep up the good work." And he'd smile, a thin, tight smile of a man who had won. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie in my cot, the sounds of the barracks around me, men cleaning rifles, writing letters, laughing, and I was an outcast. I'd stare at the canvas ceiling, replaying that day on the ridge. Did I freeze? Did I hesitate? The doubt. That was Keller's real weapon. He hadn't just poisoned the platoon against me. He had poisoned me against me. I'd grip the edges of my cot, my knuckles white just to stop, from shaking, not from fear, from a rage so cold and so deep it scared me. I'd close my eyes and all I could see was the sight picture, clear, the wind, the shot. It was a good shot. It was a clean shot. But the lie was so loud. It was screaming in my ears, and the truth was just a whisper. I was at my breaking point. I was standing by the burn pit, the sun setting, casting long, ugly shadows. I was stirring the smoldering waste, my face streaked with soot and sweat. I felt nothing. I was numb. I was an empty shell. Keller had won. He'd broken me. He'd erased me. I had become the very thing he'd called me, a hollow man. And as the last light of the sun disappeared behind the mountains, I felt a cold calm. The numbness receded, and in its place, something new, something hard. If I was a ghost, I decided, I would learn to haunt. I didn't try to clear my name. I knew it was impossible. Words were his weapon. They were useless to me. So, I stopped talking. I just worked. I burned the waste. I filled the sandbags. I pulled the worst guard shifts. The 0200 to PAL 600 dead man's watch. The one where your body is screaming for sleep and the shadows play tricks on you. And I did it all, perfectly. My sandbags were tight. My sectors on guard duty were scanned with methodical precision. I became a machine, and I started to rebuild, in secret. I couldn't go to the range, so I practiced in my mind. I'd sit in the dark, in the latrine, the only place I was truly alone. I'd field strip a rifle I didn't have. I'd feel the cold steel. I'd reassemble it. I'd dry fire. Just a click in the darkness over and over, focusing on the trigger squeeze. I'd run. I'd wake up at 0300, hours before my shift, and I'd run the perimeter of the fob, inside the HESCO walls. I'd run until my lungs were on fire and my legs were screaming. I'd push past the pain, channeling all the humiliation, all the rage, into a single burning point of focus. I wasn't just getting strong. I was getting hard. I was forging myself in the fire of my own shame. The first sergeant, 1SG Top Miller, started watching me. He was an old-school warrior, a man who had been fighting since before I was in high school. He never said a word. He'd just be there, drinking his coffee at 0400, standing in the shadow of the command tent, watching me run past his hooch. He saw me on guard duty, standing in the rain, my eyes never wavering from my sector. He saw the others sleeping on their feet, and he saw me, awake. One night, a mortar attack. The sirens blared. Incoming! 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 The world exploded. Everyone ran for the bunkers. I ran to my guard post. I grabbed the M240. I put my helmet on, chambered around, and I scanned my sector. I was looking for the flash, the origin. I was doing my job. The attack passed. 1SG Miller found me there, still on the gun, staring into the dark. He just nodded. He didn't say anything, but I knew. He knew. He was testing me, and I was passing. The intel and the AO started getting bad, real bad. The enemy was getting bolder. We started taking casualties, small nagging casualties from IEDs, harassing fire. The platoon was stretched thin. The tension on the FOB was a wire pulled tight. Keller, he was getting sloppy, panicked, making bad calls. The men felt it. One morning, I was cleaning the motor pool, covered in grease, when 1SG Miller walked up to me. He didn't say hello. He just handed me a cleaning rod. The captain's in the armory specialist. He wants to see his marksman's rifle, the one that's been neglected. I didn't say anything. I just wiped my hands and followed him. We walked into the armory. My rifle, my M110, was on the bench. It was beautiful. The armorer had kept it clean. Keller was there. He looked furious. Top, what is this? I specifically. The captain wants his best eyes on this, Lieutenant. Miller cut him off, his voice like gravel. And this specialist. Whatever label you put on him is the best set of eyes we have. We're short-handed. Intel just dropped a high-value target in our laps. Operation Serpent's Tooth. We're going tonight. Evans, you're with me. Keller's face went white, then purple. First Sergeant, I am protesting this. I am lodging a formal complaint. I will not have my platoon's cohesion compromised by him. He is a security risk. 1SG Miller got very quiet. He turned slowly to face the lieutenant. He wasn't a tall man, but in that moment, he was a giant. Lieutenant Keller, you will take my fire team. You will put Specialist Evans exactly where I tell you to, and you will lead. Is that clear? Keller looked like he was going to explode, but he saw something in the first sergeant's eyes. He just said, "Clear, First Sergeant." He turned and looked at me. It wasn't hatred. It was fear. He was being forced to go into the dark, and he had to bring the man he'd tried to destroy with him. I picked up my rifle. The weight felt good. It felt like home. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was just going to work. Operation Serpent's Tooth. The name itself felt wrong, venomous. The plan was a night raid. Intel said an HVT, a bomb maker, was holed up in a compound in a valley we called the Civ. It was a known ambush-heavy area. We were going in on 2 Blackhawks fast roping down, Ghost Platoon and a team from 1SG Miller. My job, find a high point, set up a sniper overwatch, and keep their heads down while the assault element, led by Lieutenant Keller, breached the compound. The insertion was loud. The helicopters tore through the night, the whump, whump, whump of the blades echoing off the canyon walls. I was last out. As I hit the ground, the world erupted. The cold insertion was hot. Green tracers stitched the darkness. RPGs screamed. It was a setup. The HVT wasn't here. This was a kill box. "Get to cover! Get to cover!" Keller was screaming into the radio, his voice an octave too high. "Where is the overwatch? Evans, where is your overwatch?" "Moving, sir," I yelled, my legs pumping. I was with 1SG Miller and Diaz. We scrambled up a rocky incline. bullets snapping past our heads. Diaz, spot me! Miller, watch our 6. We found a ledge. It was terrible cover, but it was all we had. I deployed my bipod. I need a target. There, Diaz yelled, pointing. Machine gun, 11 o'clock, in that window. They've got the assault element pinned. I saw them. Keller and his team were trapped behind a low courtyard wall. The machine gun was tearing the wall apart, piece by piece. They were being cut to ribbons. And Keller, I saw him through my thermal scope. He wasn't moving. He wasn't firing. He was just huddled. He was frozen. The exact thing he had accused me of. He was completely, utterly paralyzed by fear. Evans, take the shot, Miller screamed. I don't have it. I'm suppressed. Another gun had opened up, zeroed, in on our small ledge. Rocks exploded next to my head, stinging my face with 1,000 tiny needles. We move, I said. It wasn't an order. It was a fact. We move, or they die. Move where? Diaz yelled. Down there. It's a death trap. Not down, I said. I looked at Keller, frozen behind that wall. I looked at the machine gun nest. And I looked at my rifle. My job was Overwatch, but the Overwatch position was a death sentence, and the men below were already dead. I had to change the math. Cover me. I left my rifle. I took my sidearm and 2 grenades. Evans, what the hell are you? Miller started. You wanted Overwatch, First Sergeant? I'm giving you a better one. I slid off the ledge into the darkness. I didn't go toward Keller. I went around. I used the shadows. I used the noise. Every burst of gunfire was a new sound, a new shadow to move in. I was the ghost. I was the man who burned the shit. I was the man they thought was a coward, but I was also the man who had run the perimeter every night at Oro 300. I knew how to move in the dark. I was fast, and I was quiet. I moved through the chaos, unseen. I was in their flank. I was inside their perimeter. I found the machine gun nest. 2 men. They were focused on Keller's team, laughing, just pouring rounds. I cooked the first grenade. 1, 2, 3. I tossed it. The explosion was deafening. I was in before the smoke cleared, my pistol up. 2 shots. 2 men down. Silence. I keyed my mic. My voice was, Ice. Assault element, this is Evans. Your machine gun problem is solved. Move. Now. There was a pause. Then Diaz's voice. Holy. Evans is in the compound. He's in the compound. I didn't wait. I moved deeper. I found another nest, another grenade, another fight. I was no longer a marksman. I was a storm. I was clearing the compound, alone. And then I found them. Keller and his team. They were cowering. The main gunfire had stopped, but they were still hiding. A grenade, one of ours, rolled near them. A friendly grenade dropped by a panicked soldier. It bounced and settled right at Keller's feet. He just stared at it. His eyes were wide. He was whimpering. Time. It just stopped. I saw the green pineapple. I saw the seams in the metal. I saw his terrified face. I saw Diaz 20 yards away trying to get to him. He wouldn't make it. I don't know why I did it. I didn't think. I just moved. I sprinted across the 20 feet of open courtyard. I didn't grab the grenade. There wasn't time. I just tackled him. I tackled Lieutenant Keller. I put my own body, my own armor between him and the blast. I wrapped myself around him, my head down, and screamed, "Grenade!" The explosion was intimate. It felt hot. The force threw us against the wall. It wasn't a bang, it was a push. A giant hot hand that picked me up and slammed me down. My ears, just ringing. A high-pitched whine. Shrapnel tore through the back of my plate carrier. I felt a sharp, hot pain in my leg. I pushed myself off him. He was okay, shaking, crying, but alive. Diaz ran up. Evans! Evans! You're hit! I looked down. My leg, yeah, it was wet. I'm fine, I panted. Get the LT. Get him on his feet. Diaz stared at me. His face was a mask of awe and shame. You saved him. I just looked at Keller. He was staring at me. The coward. The ghost. The man he'd tried to erase. And in his eyes, I saw it. The truth. It was right there, reflecting back at me in the moonlight. I didn't need to say a word. My actions, they had screamed louder than any report he could ever file. The whole platoon, they had seen it. The truth was out. The debrief was quiet. It was held in the captain's office. Just me, the captain, 1SG Miller, Diaz, and Lieutenant Keller. My leg was bandaged. I was full of painkillers. Keller, he just sat there. He looked small. He looked like a child in a uniform that was too big for him. "I've read the preliminary AARs," the captain said, his voice void of emotion. "They're confusing. Lieutenant Keller, your report of the engagement at Operation Stone's Throw seems to conflict with the reports from Operation Serpent's Tooth." Keller opened his mouth. A small sound came out. He looked at me, then he looked at Diaz. Diaz stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. "Sir, I need to amend my statement from Stone's Throw. I was wrong." He looked at me, his eyes full of an apology I didn't need. Specialist Evans, he never froze. He neutralized the threat. I was the one who was slow. And Lieutenant Keller, Diaz took a breath. The lieutenant was compromised. Evans saved us, then, and last night. The room was silent. Keller just sank. He put his head in his hands. He started to sob, not loudly, just a quiet, broken sound. The captain looked at me. "Specialist, do you have anything to add?" I thought about it. I thought about the burn pits. I thought about the whispers. I thought about the long, cold nights of doubt. I thought about the rage. And I looked at the broken man in front of me. Revenge. It wasn't what I wanted. It felt cheap. I didn't want to destroy him. I just wanted my name back. And I realized in that moment, I already had it. "Sir," I said, my voice hoarse, "what matters is that Ghost Platoon is safe. What matters is the mission. We got out. That's my report." The captain just nodded, slowly. He understood. He looked at Keller. "Lieutenant, you're confined to this FOB. Don't go anywhere. We'll be discussing your future." Keller was transferred 2 days later, reassigned for psychological evaluation. We never saw him again. The cowardice charge on my record, it just vanished. 1SG Miller took care of it. My rifle was returned. The next day, I was at the mess hall. I got my tray. I sat down, and no one moved. Then Diaz sat across from me. He just nodded. "Evans, Diaz," I said. "It was enough. I learned something in that valley. Honor isn't a word on a piece of paper. It's not something a commander can give you, and it's not something he can take away. It's not in the medals or the ranks. It's in the actions. It's in the doing. It's what you do when the world is on fire and everyone is watching, and it's what you do when you're all alone, in the dark, with nothing but your own integrity. They can try to bury you. They can stack lies on top of you until you can't breathe. But the truth is a heavy thing. It has weight, and eventually, it always finds its way to the surface. In the military, loyalty is supposed to be the bedrock. It's the bond. But when that bond is broken by a lie, only the truth can carry the weight. Where loyalty ends, justice begins.